Yeah, like I if there's anything like, at least from my perspective, is that art within a community is like the big takeaway here is saying like art, political art within a community is helpful. And maybe perhaps before art was successful in like maybe skewing people a way or another, but I don't think it's like it's just part of a broader cultural conversation about a topic or whatever. I think it's more about, yeah, a broader social conversation. I think art contributes to that conversation, but it is not the conversation itself. And it can also spark conversations as well. So, would you like to introduce yourself to myself and chat by your name or how you want to be called, your pronouns, and what you're here for?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name's Benedict. Pronouns are he, him. A student studying art and philosophy and ethics. And I'm doing a project on the history of political art. Really want to just interview you about it.
Oh, well, great, great. I don't know every political art in the history of humanity, sadly. So I
Sadly,
don't
me
know.
neither.
I'll try to explain or to answer your questions as better as much as I can. What's the angle? Is it like the very broad, like every, like all political art, or like are you going at a specific angle or a specific period or place and time?
I'm trying to cover as much as possible. Um, I mean, obviously, there's definitely a lot more to look at the closer to current time that you get. Um, the main point isn't necessarily just looking at all the different periods of political history. It's the main focus is an evaluation, a final evaluation of sort of whether political art is actually successful in its aims and whether it's
Interesting.
actually effective.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, perfect. That sounds like a very interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Amazing. All right. So I don't know if you had any uh, questions or like ways of leading discussion first.
Yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
few questions written down.
Yeah. Perfect.
I mean, I guess to just to start off with, because I mean you've covered a lot in your channel, which as I've said to you, your channel is definitely a major source for my project, because I think it's highly interesting and highly informative. Um, so just from your perspective, who would you say, if you had to pick three, would be the most important and influential artists when it comes to political art? And it doesn't have to be artists whose whole careers were based around political art. It could be artists who only made one or two political pieces. But who would you say is the most influential and important?
That's an interesting question, because you have to also think about like like you were talking about their political, like how if like efficient were they, right, in their messages
Mm-hmm.
and art. And it's like, when I think of political art, a lot of it, I think, not only in terms of their messages and what they wanted, but sometimes also in terms of reading the politics within that artwork, despite what the artist wanted in a way. Um,
Yeah.
and all right, like for example, Picasso is like a great example of political art that a lot of people would point to, because for example, Guernica, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the most known political work in the world, because it denounced the Spanish Civil War. It denounced fascism. But was it effective in its denunciation? Maybe it was, but at the same time, the fascists won in Spain, and then a couple of years later, the Nazis took over Paris. So how effective was that? And if it wasn't effective, is it still good political art? Is political art that's not effective still good political art? And I would argue probably yes. I don't know. I'm not even sure about that. But to answer your question, sorry about that. Because I'm thinking, like, for example, one artist that I really like is Barbara Kruger, who developed a style and a language, and it's extremely political, her art. And what I think is the most telling about her work was that it was captured by, like, she's obviously anti-capitalist, or at least, like, to use a euphemism, anti-consumerism. But her style was captured by capitalist interests. And I don't know if you know Barbara Kruger and her style. Do you know
Yeah.
Barbara Kruger is the white bold text within a red square, a red rectangle. So if you look at Supreme, Supreme, I don't know if they're still relevant. I'll just show it to chat just to put into context. Like, this is Supreme, but Supreme totally ripped off Barbara Kruger here. But yeah, Supreme took their, like, the whole branding of Supreme, and it's the branding that made it popular, was taken from Barbara Kruger's art, which was kind of a denunciation in itself of Supreme. So because of that context, one of the first artists I would say was Barbara Kruger. Barbara Kruger in itself, and her art in itself is great political work, but I feel like in its context where it's being captured by capitalist interests, it shows that a lot of the times when you try to make a political art, or especially or just political activism against capitalism, that's her statement, that capitalism will include it, and that's something like a capitalist realism that you will get into if you look into Mark Fisher. His capitalist realism talks about that specifically, and because of that context, I would put Barbara Kruger. And it's not just her art; it's also how her art was used later by other people, and the way it was used later by other people was actually made her point even, more relevant in a way. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you.
Perfect. And that's my first. So someone asked me to repeat the question. So the question was like three of the most influential political art were political artists and their political artwork. So Barbara Kruger was the first one, and I gave him the reason. The second one, I'm trying to think. I'll try to be creative in my answers as well. So I'll give you it's a video I made, the politics of an artwork that didn't look political. And the reason why I want to say that is I think that artworks can also sometimes not look political at all, and still be political, and because they don't look political in the first place, are very very important. So The Gleaners by Millet. There you go. Jean-François Millet's The Gleaners. So Jean-François Millet's The Gleaners, I made a video about that, and what he did is he showed gleaners who are usually peasants who are very poor, that have to gather some scraps of food on the floor, while you see some rich people in the back, or like a how do you call it, a manager in the back, telling them to work and all that. So there's this class commentary in that picture. But Millet's Gleaners, which are very well known, are not seen through that political lens. And I feel like that can be very effective as well, in the sense that you are how would I say this? You are like subverting politics in the mainstream without making it political. Very often when something's too overtly political, it's taken with a bit of caution, or it's taken with less open-mindedness. But Millet, he makes a political painting that was actually refused and denounced by many aristocrats or bourgeois at the time for being a bit too political. But now a lot of people have these paintings in their houses. I know like in France, it's a very, very popular painting that's more there to be like a decor. And because it was able to infiltrate itself in houses and stuff like that, it can be a good political, even though most people will never see the political impact or the political statement of such an artwork. It can still be a good way to engage politically with someone by talking about the history of Millet's Gleaners. So let's say you're a little anarchist like me, or a Marxist or whatever, or someone who's. Now I'm talking a lot of art from leftist perspective, by the way, obviously, because I'm a leftist. I think you can have someone from the right as well who would, and his or her reasons would be completely different, obviously. But for me, I would engage with that artwork with someone else. I was like, oh, Millet's Gleaners, like, did you know that was actually pretty subversive at the time? And someone would see that and be like, wait, why was this so controversial and subversive? It's just, three nice peasant women, working in the field. There's nothing controversial about it. And then if you can explain that controversy and like the class antagonism within that picture itself, it leads to political conversations, which is something that political artworks can do. And thirdly, I'm sorry for taking so much time to answer those questions. But at the same time, I'm trying to
the more detail, the merrier.
Yeah, I'm trying to put as many details to maybe help the reflection. And the second one, and I'll show it. Hold on. It's I'll say Signac, Paul Signac, a pointillist. It could be pretty much any pointillist who is in the movement, but pointillism just in general, and again I'm linking it back to my own politics, but pointillism is strongly influenced by anarchism. Paul Signac was an anarchist. One of his most famous paintings, which I'm showing right now on stream, you're probably not looking at stream right now, but which I'm showing you now on stream, is called In the Time of Harmony, but it was actually its original title was actually In the Time of Anarchy, but he had to change it because being an anarchist at that time could basically get you in jail, and he didn't like the idea of going to jail, obviously. But there's also Félix Fénéon, an art curator who was a big patron of the pointillists. He was also an anarchist. The MoMA, was it MoMA? I think MoMA made a whole thing on Félix Fénéon and his anarchism. So if you want to look into that, because what I find interesting about pointillism is that not only did it have a political agenda behind it, or for many pointillists, but also in the very way that they painted, there was an anarchist ideas behind it. So the whole idea of it's basically harmonizing the individual and the collective through their way of painting. So the individual, so anarchism is all about the harmony of individuals within, like, forming a coherent collective in a way. And what pointillism is doing is taking individual dots who are not blending in with others, but not completely isolated, right? It's individual dots that are working with other dots around them to make a coherent role, but still contain their individuality. So the politics of pointillism is, and that's why I wanted to have Signac as the third one, is that the politics is not only in the representation of the subjects that they're showing, but also in the very way that they're painting. So that would be my third one, just because I find that interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly familiar with pointillism or the politics behind it, so I think I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah. I also made a video about it. It's been a while ago, but I wrote the politics of pointillism. But yeah, no, there's If you look into the MoMA thing on MoMA Félix Fénéon, I'm showing it on stream. So and you said you would look back on stream for the notes and all that. So they made it. Yeah, the MoMA did a whole show called Félix Fénéon, the Anarchist and the Avant-Garde, from Signac to Matisse and beyond. So it's all about the politics of Félix Fénéon, who pioneered or who patroned the pointillists. Was there any follow up?
Yeah. Possibly a tricky question here. After talking about all that, do you think there's one singular piece of art, one singular art piece that you think stands out above all the others, as with its politics, its intentions, and its background?
Yeah. Well, it'll always depend, like for every single artist, right? Or for every single person who likes art. I would have to say in the time of Harmony, which was in the time of Anarchy, was one that I personally enjoyed a lot because of because of its story, its background, and not only because they Signac in the time of Anarchy talks about anarchism not only in the way he painted but also in the subject that he's depicting. Like in the time of Anarchy, he's showing like this is what anarchism or anarchy would look like. Everybody's happy. Everybody's it's like an idyllic way of showing off the future by saying that it's anarchist. So to me, it would be that, but I'm sure for other people it would be completely different. Like, and that's the interesting thing about political art is that it can be, you can get politics out of anything, even though it's not inherently political. For example, if you look at a lot of fascist art, for example, I don't know if you've heard of the Entartete Kunst exhibition in Germany.
I don't think I have.
So in the 30s, it's really interesting. In the 30s, the Nazis didn't like modern art, and they would label it as degenerate. And in order to make fun of degenerate artists, they made a whole exhibition on modern art, showing, hey, look at these degenerate artists. Look at, like, they're mentally ill. They're insane. They're ridiculous. And turns out it was one of the most popular exhibitions in Germany at the time. But it's like they showed Kandinsky, Picasso, Emil Nolde, all the modern artists that they disagreed with. But alongside with that exhibition, like denigrating modern art that they disagreed with, they also had an exhibition of art that they elevated. That they said, this is actually the good art. So they were contrasting the bad art and the good art. And the good, like, by elevating the good art, you're politicizing it in a way, even though there's no politics to that good art. For example, a lot of the Nazi aesthetics, or the Nazis, what kind of art they like, is surrounded by the aesthetics of for example, more like antiquity, like the Romans, right? For example.
Yeah.
Like for example, you take Michelangelo's David, and it's not a political artwork, but it can be politicized when you idolize it as, this is this is what art should be, and this is what our peak of art should be, in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. It doesn't look political, but in some regimes it can turn political when it becomes a political aesthetic ideal. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense.
So yeah, it's like some people would say all art is political, and I don't know if I agree with that, but I do think that all art can be politicized. That's for sure. No matter what the art is, it can be politicized, and I do give credence to the whole idea that all art is political, because it will always say something, like all art says something about a period or a time or a place, and that thing, either it be an observation or a critique, it's still engaging with the world and might influence the people engaging, the engagement of other people. And I think that in itself is political.
Yeah. Well, I think I may have answered this next question with my last question, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a piece of art that has influenced you heavily in your social political ideology?
I don't. That's well. I'm glad you still questioned or answered or asked it. I'm sorry, because I don't think art has necessarily influenced my my like political philosophy or ideology at all, and I don't think it could. Perhaps media, like not like because we're talking about like when we say art, like we talk about like visual arts, I imagine, right? But like if you include films and like movies, TV shows, and all that, that might have more of an impact because I think a lot of the art we look at is you will gravitate towards the art that you that you'll agree with, and
yeah,
and you know, I think I don't know about the power of art to, at least visual art, to challenge your political ideas. It can challenge some facets of it, right? Or it can ask questions, but it doesn't. At least I don't think it gives necessarily answers, and because of that, I don't think you can necessarily be like, you might be challenged in the sense that it asks the right questions, but not because like, oh, this painting is right, so I will change my ideology. But like, let's say you watch you look at Barbara Kruger and you're like, oh my god, like it might just make you more sensitive to some topics than others, but I don't think it necessarily makes you change your whole framework in general. I feel like that idea of like changing a framework or a political philosophy or ideology is like it's like the accumulation of many things. Art perhaps could be part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I think it takes a lot more to change a whole philosophy and maybe for some people that's enough, right? Maybe for someone, they saw the retrospective, or it's not really a retrospective, but the show of Félix Fénéon at the MoMA. They got out there and like, yeah, I'm an anarchist now. But I doubt it. It takes more than that. So to answer your question, I don't think I necessarily agree. I don't necessarily think that an artwork changed my perspective, but I do think that some artworks do make me, like, force me to think about different ideas and topics in a different way and force me to engage with these. And they either give credence or make me have to rethink some parts of how I think. Like I'll give you an example, like Basquiat's I made a video on Basquiat's Black Cops. And I'm not black, so in case you didn't know, I'm not black, I'm white. So a lot of the black experience I don't necessarily I can only get through either art or through actually experiences that can be communicated to me. And for example, through engaging with the whole idea of black cops through Basquiat's painting, like when I want to make a video on it, like I actually had to read on the subject of black cops. So like, what? Someone in chat says, "You're white?" Yeah. It's my coming out right now as a white person. So like the having to engage with the whole idea of black cops, which is not something that your normal white dude is going to think about if they're not forced to think about it, right? And Basquiat does say, like, basically says fuck black cops, or the irony of a black policeman. That's the name of the painting. And the irony of a black policeman. And he does he asks us, he makes us ask a question. All right, so what do I think of black cops? Well, in my head, it's like, all right, well, are black cops different from white cops? Are they if I'm critical of cops, is a black cop better in the sense that they understand more the struggle of the black community, and therefore they can perhaps be one way to solve issues of the black community? And it's like these questions, and to answer these questions, I had to go do some research, and I had to actually did an interview with James Foreman Jr., who wrote a whole book about it, and who's had experiences with his own black students, with other black cops, and who was able to to communicate these experiences that otherwise I wouldn't know about. So it's like, I don't know how much that influenced my ideology, but it definitely improved my understanding of the world through those questions and through facing me with things that otherwise I would never think about. And because of that, it informs my politics, but like in a more abstract way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Did you have? You're welcome.
Yeah, a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Of course, I have all day. I like these. I like these questions.
I'm glad. I suppose, looking at the final point of all of this, how effective do you think that political art is actually at causing meaningful and impactful change? Does it often achieve its goal in any notable way?
In any notable way? I like the idea of in any notable way, because like there might be different ways that it can achieve its political goal. Like all the anti-fascist artists of the 40th century, of the 20th century, like in the 40s or the 30s, they weren't successful in their art. But like there's a case that could be made that say that they failed. Their art was unsuccessful. But there's also a case to be said that it might have contributed to a disdain, or a stronger disdain, for fascism, which made which helped cultivate the resistance in France, right? And that helped federate people against fascism, like in later in the war. So it's like, maybe I don't think it's effective on its own, but I think it can federate people together. For example, I think art can be a good way to rally communities together, and sometimes it's not just immediate communities, like geographical communities, but also communities of ideas, communities of interests. And I think art can rally these people around, because for example, different ideologies or different I'm someone who believes that memes, for example, are can be considered art. There's a strong case for memes being art, in the sense that they communicate ideas, they're shared, and they use visual languages and symbology and symbols to communicate ideas. And I do believe that memes can be very political and politically effective. Both on the right and on the left. And the right hasn't been that good at using visual arts for political advocacy. It's usually been a leftist thing, and a lot of art departments are very on the left. There's this anecdote. One of my first videos was on Diego Rivera's A Man at Crossroads, which was a mural that's since been destroyed because it was commissioned by the Rockefellers, and he decided to paint Marx, Trotsky. I think he even painted Lenin on that mural, on it, for Rockefeller, in the Rockefeller Center in New York, Rockefeller, who's like a billionaire. So Rockefeller didn't like that, obviously, and people were asking like, why the fuck would Rockefeller hire a communist to make a mural? And Diego was like, oh, it's because good luck finding a capitalist artist. I mean, now it's different, right? Now it's different, but like, there's definitely a history with leftism and anti-fascism, and art in general being a bit more active on the left. But for memes, to go back on memes, I think both the right and the left are very effective at using memes to popularize or to support ideologies or to federate around ideologies, right? Like, I was thinking about that earlier. It's a super old meme, but like the whole, the whole meme of being super straight, right? It's like, I'm straight, but like I like women, but I don't like trans women, so I just like women. And like, it's a meme, but it does have political implications and social implications, and it did start a debate. And it's also a way for people who are more like generally on the right to signal to each other, yeah, I'm super straight, and you're like, oh, that guy's cool, that guy's on my side, right? That's a stupid meme, but I like there might be other memes that are more like ones that are a bit more radical is like the didn't do nothing or something like that. Like it was like a meme to to target black people as anyway to like be to marginalize black people, and that meme is never going to I don't think it will be very good at convincing people that black people are actually bad, right? Like I don't think a meme will make you think, yeah, black people are actually bad. But I do think that kind of meme, just a joke, can get people together, create a sense of community, that even though you don't think that black people are bad, you'll start doing the the didn't do nothing kind of meme, and can inform maybe future political, or at least inform your group's leanings, and that might spiral into actually political positions or political actions. So all this to say, all this tangent on memes is to say, like, I think it can be a good way to federate people around ideas, to get people together, and to use symbology or statements that federate people around like ideas, even though they're like narrow says in chat, like a satirical statement made out of habit will eventually just become genuine. And that's true. Like, people will repeat these things. And I think that's for memes, but also like just symbols and art can be part of that, I believe. But yeah, it's those kinds of yeah. I don't even remember your original question, but I do think I answered it in a way.
No, yeah, you did. That's I didn't think about the point of the memes, actually. That's a really good point. Especially because how relevant it is today. Would you say, having said that, art itself isn't enough on its own to perhaps make significant change, it's a piece of the puzzle. Do you think that political art on its own is at all under or overvalued in its contribution to socio-political change?
Yeah, I do think it can be overvalued. I think, yeah, like for example, I'll fall back to a lot of like my old videos, because those are the topics I've researched more. But for example, Picasso didn't do any political art during the occupation in Paris. He lived in Paris during the whole time of the occupation, except for like a month or two at the beginning. And he was, he was being visited by the Gestapo and all that super fun stuff. And Picasso didn't do any political art during his time under Nazi rule in Paris. And that's after doing Guernica, which was like, really known for being political anti-fascist art. And some people were criticizing him for not doing political art, or for not taking a stance during the occupation of Nazis in France. And it's like, I don't know exactly what it would have done for Picasso to do like an anti-Nazi painting. And some people like interpret some of his paintings during that era as being anti-Nazi, but he wasn't overtly political in his paintings. And it's like also like, what would have been the power of being political in that artwork or in that period of his life? If anything, it would have been, it would given a good excuse for him to get arrested and sent off to unhappy places, and and what would have happened? He makes a big mural that like maybe a couple of dozens of people see before it's taken down, and it doesn't do much. I don't know. I don't think it's that powerful. But he was under a lot of critique for not doing political art at that time. And I don't know how yeah, no, and the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking like, especially nowadays, I don't think art has as much power as it used to have. For example, people like I'm thinking like Jericho's Raft of the Medusa had a political message behind it, and people were talking about it. It's like, oh my God, he denounced the incompetence of the Bourbon monarchy at that time or whatever, and like people were like all hyped up about that. But let's say like someone denounces the I don't know, Biden for whatever reason and makes a big painting about it. I don't know how much people would be talking about it, because I don't think it federates as much as it used to. And even books, even if you write a book, I don't know how much that like a novel, like a political novel, if we look at other forms of art, I don't know how much it would. Yeah, I don't know how much it would get people to engage with those ideas, right? Yeah, I don't like. I think perhaps like even series, and like we have Squid Game that literally like criticizes capitalism, at least from my understanding. We had Parasite, which like was super popular, that was literally criticizing class society and capitalism. And like, did people get out of it more critical of capitalism? I don't think so. I don't know. It can be a good way to approach anti-capitalism to people, let's say, who said, oh yeah, I loved Parasite. But aside from that, I don't think people will come to their own conclusions of, oh yeah, capitalism is actually bad after watching Squid Game or after watching Parasite or after watching whatever new series or movies that are anti-capitalist. Because if there is artworks that can be more political, like that can be more efficient in their political activism, I think it would be TV series, movies, maybe songs, and like I said earlier, memes. I think those are a bit more mass media in a way that appeal to the most people. I don't think visual arts appeal to that many people anymore. For example, it's something that I've been advocating for. I've been telling people, if you want to look at art and if you want to look for artists that are saying relevant things to you, like don't come to me to, like, people ask me like, oh, which artist is up and coming artist that I should look at or whatever. Like I keep saying, look at artists in your community, and again, it can be a geographical and a community, or like a community of ideas or of interest, and like go look at artists from that community. And those artists won't be the most popular artists. They won't be the artists that appeal to the most people, but they might be the artists that speak to issues that speak to you. So for example, I live in a if you were looking at my Google Street View, or the stream, like I live like in a very rural area. I live in a small village. It comes with its own challenges, and there might be like there are some universal questions that can be asked by by artists from around the world, but like there are also some very local questions that need to be asked, and like challenges that our community, as a rural community that's getting increasingly old and that doesn't have the necessary amount of people to, like, you know, replace those old people, while everybody goes to the city, like our local area is facing death, right? But we're not going to get art having that makes us engage with that reality, or challenges us with that reality, from, you know, artists from urban areas, or artists from, you know, that have other questions to ask. So I keep telling people, look at people in your community, and perhaps that work that will ask questions about topics that are more focused on your situation, that work might have more impact on you. And in terms of political art, when it comes to like visual arts, I think that's where it can be more powerful. Because in terms of, like, you know, you can criticize capitalism through art, but that's just like, you know, you'll be the 1,200th millionth like anti-capitalist painting, and what's it gonna do, right? Yeah, I'm not sure it's gonna convince that many people. But, you know, let's say you're I don't know, you live in a poor neighborhood that's, you know, with a lot of stores that are you know, leaving, and I'm just making something up, but like, let's say there's once like a grocery store that closes next to you, and that grocery store was really important, but it closed down because your neighborhood is being devitalized by, you know, everybody either dying of old age or leaving for the city. Then you can make a project about that grocery store, and how important it was to the community, and how those kinds of places are the ones that give vitality to your community. And perhaps, you know, ask questions about, hey, maybe we do need a grocery store here, or understand, all right, this place wasn't only good in terms of providing us a place to buy food, but it was also a place to gather as a community, right? It's a grocery store, I get it, but like, you know, if everyone has to go to the nearest city, then the exchanges there are less local. They're more and more anonymized. So it's like, all right, this place was a place for the community to gather, and having that conversation about, hey, we just lost a place for a community to gather, perhaps can lead people to go, hey, that's true. All these memories, like they were there because we gathered as a community. Perhaps we needed another place now that the grocery store is down to gather as a community. So like, all that to say, I think art can be impactful on a local range in a way. Because on a broad range, I'm very skeptical, and mostly probably because of our oversaturation with images and stuff like that. Like, I don't think paintings are that powerful when they're, and like, especially when it's online, or when it's from, you know, someone from like let's say like my closest city is like Montreal. Like, oh, an artist from Montreal, that's just like any other artist. You feel less connected to that artist, and like there's so many of them online, so it's like it's very hard to connect with that artist and actually listen. And I feel like on the community scale, on the smaller scale, you're more able to give you're more you might be more charitable with the artist that comes from your community. And that's me, who loves art. So imagine someone who doesn't really know art. They don't care about the artist who lives 30 minutes away, right? But they care about the artist who is their neighbor, and might actually look at art for the first time by looking at artists from their neighbor. I don't know. Take whatever you will in all that information I gave.
No, it's interesting.
Thank you.
So would you say that the main reason visual art isn't as effective at federating people as it used to be is because of the new age of films and TV that we're in?
Yeah, I do think so, and I think we have access also to so much of it and we rarely rally around those works anymore, because there's so many of them. For example, like I'll use Squid Game again. Squid Game was like a sensation. It was really, really popular. And because it was really, really popular, people were able to exchange on it. And that's when, like, that's where the engagement, like, is effective. It's when I can meet someone, like, you know, I don't know, like, that I don't really have a relationship with yet, but we can both bond over a TV show that we both watched, and we can discuss on it and discuss its impact and its criticism and all that. But artworks, it's harder to do that because we don't have like, oh, have you seen this new painting by X artist that, you know, a couple of people know and you probably don't. And not only does it sound snobbish to say, but also it's like it's just, you know, that people will not have seen that artwork unless you're like in a very artsy world already. But it's easier to bond over artworks and that everybody has seen, and just visual arts doesn't have this everybody has seen it kind of vibe, while as movies, TV shows, and memes, because they're so easily shareable, can be a good way to. And also I think a meme is easier to share. For example, to go back on memes, but like, you know, oh, you haven't seen that meme? Oh, let me show it to you right now. And it's so easy to get, and you can just get a laugh really quickly. It's like, oh yeah, that is funny. But like, oh, you haven't seen that painting? Let me show it to you on my phone. It's like the person will be like, oh yeah, it's nice. But it's harder to engage with a painting on the fly or like casually than it is to do with a meme. That's another element to the answer, I think.
Yeah. Do you think a re-interest in visual art and political visual art, do you think it should be encouraged? Do you think it's worth being encouraged?
I think it's worth being encouraged, of course. I think it's really good, but I don't think I don't know. I've kind of given up with the idea of like building a national, international like language for art, like not language, but like repertoire for artists. Like people used to do that. Like, you know, like everybody knows Picasso, everybody knows Dali, everybody knows, you know, those big names in art history, Da Vinci and Caravaggio and all that. But that was back then. Like today, in terms of contemporary artists, you can give any name and like not everybody will know that name, you know? Like maybe Banksy, even Ai Weiwei, maybe not, you know? Ai Weiwei probably not, actually. And I'm thinking, like, Banksy's probably the only one. So it's like, it's I think we come to a time in, you know, in art history where we're not going to have those, all those common artists, right? That everybody will know. And that is also due to the fact that there's not much authority in the art world, as there used to be. Like the authority got more like diffused, which is good in some ways and bad in some others. Like for example, you don't have like art critics and how do you call it? Curators and I don't know, directors in museums are not as influential as they used to be, right? So it makes for like, you know, it, and also there's so many different artists, there's so many different critics, there's so many different curators. You might have some superstars from like now and then, but like because it's so, the authority has been so decentralized, it'll be hard for everyone to say, all right, this is the new star and everybody will know this name. For example, like Basquiat and you know, Keith Haring might be like some of the last ones for that. Like, because like, oh, here is the new hot shot in art and everybody will know their name. And like, I think that now, like it won't be possible. And if it is, it'll be like your oddball. It won't be like it won't be as popular as it used to be. And I think that's a good thing. And again, I think when it comes to art, it's more like go into your communities, and the artist in your community will be a hotshot, but in your community. And maybe sometimes they can export the art like that is on the community outside, and that can be a pride. But I don't think that this artist will necessarily be like a hotshot internationally where everybody knows their name. I think the best that we can hope for is everybody in your local community will know the artist from the community's name. And I think that's what we should hope for, and I feel like that will have more impact on people in the long run.
Yeah. So you think people should strive to make a difference on a local level rather than trying to necessarily make a
yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the direction we should head towards. Like, I just think the art world has been so decentralized, and like, yeah, go to your like. I think the challenge now is to get people to engage with more community artists and build spaces for those artists from the community, for people, and like build the habit of going to these spaces to look what have the artists from my community, from my either town or whatever section in my city, neighborhood has done lately, and what do they have on their mind? How can they challenge me in our reality of living in X community? I think there's a habit to be built there, but I do think that it makes it easier as well. Like, for example, a lot of people say I don't understand art, and I understand that, right? My latest video was like trying to explain art, or trying to explain how to look at art or whatever. But I think that a lot of times people don't understand art because it's art that appeals to, like, either is very like vague, or that appeals to like a very small portion of the population, or like I don't know how to explain it. Like, I'll give you an example. It's better to explain with an example. For example, there's an artist who talks about who makes a lot of works about the art world in my province in Canada. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be great to have this artist come to my rural locality and like show off his art, which I really love. But then someone told me, like, yeah, but his art is a lot about, criticizing the art world. It's not necessarily art that will engage with people here, and people might see it and might think it's cool, but they might not necessarily be like engaged that much with it, because it's not issues and problems and that they deal with. The issues with the art world in general are not issues that the people from this community deal with, because we don't even have we don't have a museum, we don't have a gallery, we don't even have, we're really at the like, we have nothing in terms of art. So someone coming in and talking about, hey, look at all the problems of the art world, people are not going to engage with it. They might say, oh, it's pretty, but I don't really understand it. But if you if you create art that resonates with a community and that is made for a very specific community, with topics and ideas that are like modeled for the community, I feel like it makes that art a lot more easy to engage with for people that normally would have never engaged with art. Like, for example, like, I'll give another example. Like if I take my neighbor who has never really been to a museum or never been to a gallery and doesn't really, care for it, and you ask him, oh, do you know Picasso? He's like, yeah, of course I know Picasso. It's like, oh, which painting do you like the most? And like, he doesn't really necessarily have a most interesting, like a favorite painting. And if you show him Guernica and you're like, oh, like, do you think this is good? They might not even understand, like, not understand, but like be able to tell you if this is good or not. They'll be like, I don't really understand it. Like, it's geometric forms. Like, I have a hard time understanding it. And I would understand them for that, It's like normal if you don't really care for it to not really find the value in it. I wouldn't if I didn't care about Picasso, and I wouldn't if I didn't care about Van Gogh or whatever. But tell that person, hey, by the way, there's this local artist who is making an exhibition about the grocery store that closed. And well, that might actually get my neighbor to go see it and engage with it, and he will perhaps enjoy it much better because he'll be able to understand it, but not understand it in a way that's like I don't know how to say it, like it's not like stupid art. It's not like putting down the prerequisites to understanding art. It's just that it's art that is, worth engaging for that person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I get what you mean.
It's not dumbing down art. It's making art, relevant to his experience. And I feel like community art, or art that is geared towards community, is good for that as well.
Oh, sorry. I was just asking, why would historically the right be far less proficient at campaigning for the visual arts than the left?
You were cutting out again. Was it? Hold on. I'm trying to get piecing the words together. Maybe I'll get the question. It's either why do you think historically the left has been using the visual arts the most, more than the right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Yeah. I think the reason for it is because speaking from someone on the left, sometimes the left wants to be very, very inclusive and is willing to say that anything can be art, which has made for some really, really good art in the 20th century, especially. They'll make some fucked up art and, or just some fucked up shit and say, this is art. And people who are more right-leaning or conservative will disagree with that. And leftist people will be, yeah, well, it's self-expression. There's this idea of open-mindedness, but also inclusivity. So I think there's a reason for that here. And even when because I'm very critical of saying that anything can be art. And I'm on the left, but a lot of people don't like the whole idea of it's like gatekeeping art and all that. And usually, and I looked at a PragerU video lately. PragerU is a very, very, very conservative channel on YouTube, and PragerU, what they were doing is, saying that even saying to this day that modern art is kind of trash. So conservatives are very openly not into modern art, or I'm saying conservatives, but right-leaning just historically has not been into modern art. I don't know how much of a divide there was before modern art between conservatives and liberals, or just people more on the left and people more on the right. And it has to be said also that a lot of the paintings in general used to be, more of an elite kind of either pastime or career. Most of the time, people who could afford to be artists were people who had money. So that does skew a bit in the favor of people being a bit more conservative at the time. So I think it might be and I might be totally wrong on that, because now I'm just talking about I'm talking about something a bit more I don't know how to say it. It's more in my intuitions or my knowledge of art history, but I haven't done research on it. But I do think might be talking out of my ass. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. But I do think that modern art has brought this dichotomy left and right that might have not been present before. There was still disagreements, but I don't know how much it would have been right or left kind of disagreements before modern art. And with modernity, and with modernity came more of the whole ideas of socialism became more popular as well, right? And all that, mid 19th century, with Courbet saying, I actually want to paint peasants, and I was talking about Millet earlier, painting peasants, and the wealthy class saying, no, that's not they're not worthy of being painted or whatever. And some people saying, yeah, well, they're humans and they're worth being painted as well. And like that in itself is the first kind of split, I think. It's possible that it wasn't, but yeah, but I do think modern art tended to be more on the left historically, just modern art in general, because modern art is the one that kind of, it's also the one that kind of how do I say this, that kind of gets attention as well, you know, like landscape paintings were painted, you know, like traditional landscape paintings were painted all throughout, you know, modernity, but it just didn't get attention. So like, I don't know if it's true that leftists, like that artists are usually leftists. In my experience, they are, but I hang out with leftists. So of course the artists I know are leftists. That's, it's a bias from my part. I do think though that like historically there might be just as many leftists than right-wing artists, but that leftist artists were the ones that were popular just because they're the ones that were that were more into breaking boundaries and experimenting, you know, because like it's not true that with modern art there was no more traditional paintings that are like, you know, that we would consider now boring. But in this case, like, you know, like it's not that there's more leftist artists. There might be just more successful leftist artists. And it might be they're more successful because they're more willing to be controversial, or they're more willing to break with tradition, which was, at least in the 20th and 19th and 20th century, breaking with tradition was like a good thing. It was seen as progress, right? So like breaking with tradition is actually innovative, and it's, you know, progressing art. And let's say right-wing people or conservative people are not the most friendly with the whole idea of breaking with traditions, right? So yeah, I don't think it's, to reiterate, I don't think it's necessarily the fact that there's more leftist artists. It's just that they're more willing to be scandalous, and that makes for, you know, they're more clickbaity, to use a term that we would use now. Like they used more. People, like, for example, just the like we're talking about the Entartete Kunst exhibition, like the degenerate art exhibition. Even though the Nazis put that exhibition as a anti-modern art exhibition, it's still the exhibition that had the most people, like, you know, attended to. Because even if you disagree with modern art, even if you think they're like quote unquote insane or diseased or Jewish, as Nazis would say, then you still there's still an interest there that traditional art might lose in comparison. But I just want to point out, Audrey, or I don't know if that's what Audrey says, I think the futurists joining the fascists is one of the most interesting moments in avant-garde art. And there's also, I also made a video on Dali's fascism. Yeah, that's true. Like, just to add nuance to that, to what I'm saying there, there's still like the futurists are still, a lot of them were fascist. Dali wasn't on the left at all. I made a video about that if ever you're interested. But yeah, it's not like, I think there's a tendency to be more on the left, but like there's still people on the right who were. I made a video on Emil Nolde. He was the artist that was the most exhibited at the degenerate art exhibition by the Nazis, but Emil Nolde himself was a Nazi, which is quite interesting. So he was obviously right wing. But he was still a modern artist that was exhibited and ridiculed for being a modern artist within Nazi Germany, despite being a Nazi. And he wasn't a Nazi just to like, appeal to, you know, the Nazis back then, or like just to be like, hey guys, I'm actually a cool modern artist. I'm a Nazi. Like, he was a Nazi before the Nazis came to power, like before they became the Nazis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like what I'm doing. What I'm turning out to do is like just shilling all my political art videos to you and saying, "Oh yeah."
No, no, I'm enjoying it. I think it's good. Getting all the info I can. Could you say that one of the reasons the leftist artists were more successful was because they were more willing to paint the lower class and the common people, which made them sort of appealing to a wider audience.
Interesting. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't even know if there's statistics about that because, like, well, if we look at like, it's like painting was painting like peasants and like or more of the working class was more controversial like in the 19th century. Like we took Mia for example, but there's also Courbet and all that. But from my understanding, and it can be like it can be like a prejudiced view of history, and maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't even know if there are statistics about that. But I'm making an assumption, and it might be a wrong assumption, that a lot of the attendants to, that would look at art were more bourgeois or like, petite bourgeoisie, and less the peasants who had, I don't know how much they would look at art.
Yeah, true.
I'm not sure about that. But again, like those might be, it might come from my biases, like, oh, peasants don't look at art. But at the same time, like, especially back then, I don't know how much time they had to look at art. Like almost like beginning industrialization peasants were probably working very long hours, and working people as well, from the age of like 6 years old. So working, 12-hour days, if not more, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
if not more somehow. So I don't know how much time they had, like free time they had to look at art, or maybe they did, and I don't know. But at the same time, I do think though that showing peasants and showing working class did appeal to people who looked for something different in art. I do think that like, because I can like, I personally get bored of very, very traditional art very quickly. Like academic art would get me very bored. Like going to if I went to like the Paris Salon in the 19th century, I might get bored really, really quickly, and I would just need a little bit of controversy to be interested in a painting, right? And it could be, oh my god, it's either, oh my god, they painted a woman nude that's not part of the it's not a mythological figure. Like that would be controversial. And I think painting peasants or painting workmen that kind of class is something that they've never seen, and it's like scandalous, and it's like it's something new. So people gravitated around that because like like after a couple of decades of the same Venuses reclining nude, I guess eventually you get bored, right? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I'm questions actually.
Oh really?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, like I if there's anything like that, at least from my perspective, is that, but at the same time, if it's more of a history thing, it's less of a, it might be less relevant. But I think art within a community is like the big takeaway here is saying like political art within a community is helpful. And maybe perhaps before art was successful in like maybe skewing people a way or another, but I don't think it's like, it's just part of a broader cultural conversation about a topic or whatever. I think it's more about, a broader social conversation. I think art contributes to that conversation, but it is not the conversation itself. And it can also spark conversations as well. But I don't think he is. I don't think that's necessarily the finishing point. For example, I think like right now, if you want to link that up to right now, like for example, like drag shows right now, like are really I don't think like drag shows have become the topic of like a very political topic, but they also the reason why they're becoming such a political topic is also because they're questioning the broader political discourse on, you know, questioning gender, you know, just our relationship with gender, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think perhaps if there's political art right now that's like that works really strongly, it might be the art of drag shows. But again, it's interesting because it's not necessarily the message of drag shows; it's the way in which they do it. A bit like the pointillists did. Like the pointillists were espousing anarchism, not necessarily, not always, though sometimes, but not always through what they were depicting, but how they were depicting it, through the individual dots within the collective. And here, like drag queens are not necessarily questioning like our relationship with gender through what they're saying or what they're doing. Very often, like they're singing or reading books or, you know, dancing or whatever, but through the way that they're doing it, which is like that way is questioning gender, and that's what's political about it. But yeah, I think it's maybe, and I feel like, you know, I don't think a drag queen show is going to convince someone to rethink their relationship to gender, but I do think it socially, on a social conversation, it does contribute to, you know, to that conversation. And I think, you know, art maybe not be like the end all be all, you know, kind of statement, but it's part of a statement. Right now we're criticizing a lot, you know, our relationship to gender, and now you have artists who, you know, who criticize that relationship with gender through, you know, different performances. And I think that nobody's going to be, well, maybe some people will be convinced by a drag show, but if it's normalized and if it's like, you know, accepted, and their criticism of gender becomes more and more popular, or the criticism of gender in general is more popular, and they're contributing to that criticism being more popular, even though they're not the only ones doing it. It's like it's never an isolated thing, right? It's like a community thing. It's like a social thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone in the maybe in the comments wanted to ask some questions about political art or whatever, if they had any ideas that could contribute to Benedict's paper or whatever.
Yeah, I'll take anything.
Yeah, take any information I can.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, Audrey bringing up Theodore Adorno. Says there's this great bit in aesthetic theory by Adorno where he says the debate over the definition of art is not important because whether or not X is or is not art doesn't change the culture industry. Yeah, I don't know how much the culture industry talks about like political art. I mean, yeah, it is political art in a way. The whole idea, I think it is, in the sense that political, like the whole culture industry, or the idea that industry, like a culture is being manufactured for mass consumption. Like when art is mediated through capitalism, in a way, for example, movies. If the only way to make movies is for it to be profitable, that's a political mediation of an artwork in a way. That we don't necessarily see it as political, but it can be. So if you want to say a message, but the only way for that message to go through or to go out through like a big production, the only way you can do it is if it's seen as possibly profitable by a company. Like that's a type of I wouldn't call it censorship, but kind of filtering in a way. That George Lucas was talking about. George Lucas was saying like like Soviet filmmakers have this liberty that I do not. They don't have to adhere to a line of profitability. Like he was kind of radical in that sense, and I don't know if I agree with him, but he does say, like, for example, this, like, the Soviets, all they have to do is not talk about politics, or not talk about overtly about the government. Like, he's like, but they can do anything they want. But George Lucas, I need to, I might be able to talk about politics or government, but whatever I say has to fit in the profit motive, which is a filter, or like a hoop, a smaller hoop to jump through in order to make your projects accepted. But we don't see the profit motive as a way of like selecting works of art, right? We just see it as something normal, but it's also like a capitalist way of I don't know, it may reinforce capitalism in a way, and that might make it political, but we don't see it as political, because when we think of political art, we think like statements, we think challenging things. But art that doesn't challenge might be also art that, that kind of it's stupid. Like, but like, for example, if you depict like a society that, like, the example is the Flintstones. I imagine you know the Flintstones.
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the whole idea, like the Flintstones, like it's like portraying a society of prehistory, but doing it in a capitalist kind of mindset. Like, they're still going around cars. It's like,
yeah, it's like,
it's part of the humor as well of that product, right? Of that cultural product. But it's also showing, like, it's very hard for us to imagine it any different way, or any society any differently. It's like, all right, let's show prehistory, but like, in a maybe more accurate way, or in a non-capitalist way. It might not be as appealing, or as like the Smurfs, for example. I think the Smurfs were communists. I saw something like around the Smurfs being communists.
Yeah,
but yeah, but like, yeah. So this whole idea, like, all right, let's present these, or like, you get that in, like, they present animal societies, but animal societies are also, capitalistic. Like fucking SpongeBob, like, you have the Squidward, and like SpongeBob, and like what's his name, the crab or whatever. Like, they're all in a relationship of producer and worker, or like a owner and worker. And it's like showing it's, I don't know, it's like, I feel like that in itself, like, there might be criticism of it through that, but it might also reinforce the idea that there is no alternative. Like, even if the sea animals, and it's stupid, like, it's a sponge, it's a walking sponge that's talking to a squid, but like, even if the sea animals have to work jobs that they don't like, maybe it is inevitable. Like, I don't know, because like, that's an interesting, like, sorry, I'm going off on tangents, but like, imagine a communist SpongeBob that was made in the USSR, that had the same economic system, where they would have the same relationships between like the same power relationships. We would see that USSR SpongeBob as, we would call it propaganda, right? We'd say, yeah, oh, that's kind of weird that SpongeBob is assigned a house, and is works in a I don't know, has a I don't know enough about Soviet mode of functioning, and I imagine it changed throughout the time. Oh, he has to go on the list to have a car or whatever. I don't know, but like, we would see it as like a Soviet propaganda, but like, when it's portraying capitalism, we see it as normal. And I feel like right there, that's political, but it's like the kind of political that we don't see.
I think that's an interesting side of it to look at, the modern media.
Yeah, and like some people would say, like, oh, if you don't criticize like your you're kind of like accepting it. Like
Mm.
and I'm not sure about that. Like if like for example, like I don't know, if you make a painting of something that doesn't say anything critical of politics, one way of saying, oh, it's actually political, is to say that instead of criticizing something, you're painting just a landscape, for example. And because you're just painting a landscape, in that sense it's political, in the sense that you're like, but I'm not sure about that. I can't, but I do think that if you're showing capitalism without being critical of it, or if you're just showing off capitalism either in a favorable or unfavorable way, you're still being political in a very so that might be add to like your definition of what political art is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very broad definition though.
Just I'm going to say goodbye.
I think I heard goodbye, but thank you so much. Maybe you can write in the chat. Thank you so much for your time and for your, I hope it helped a bit, and I hope I added a bit to your the information that you're going to use for the essay. And if you have any other questions, you can always send them on either Discord or Instagram. I'll be glad to answer.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to interview you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
Have a nice
I've
day.
enjoyed it very much. Yeah, you too.
Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. There you go. The first ever talk, I guess, on the Canvas stream.